The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another Sporties webinar. This one in a series of webinars during our virtual Airshow event, celebrating the fly-in season. And while we can't be together in Oshkosh, Wisconsin this summer, we are hoping to bring you some of the fun and events that happen every summer at the world's largest fly-in. Today, we're really pleased to have with us Phil Inman from ForeFlight, and he's going to share with us a number of advanced tips and some new features in aviation's most popular app. So it should be a fast-paced and entertaining hour ahead of us. My name is John Zimmerman. I'm with Sporties Pilot Shop. I'll be your facilitator today. And I'd like to thank you for joining us. As always on these webinars, a couple of quick housekeeping things before we kick off. Just a reminder, attendees are muted, so you don't need to worry about microphones or anything like that. But we do encourage your participation. So you'll see in the GoToWebinar control panel, there's an area there to ask a question. So throughout the presentation today, if you have a question, want to learn more about something, type it in there, and we'll be sure to save some time at the end to answer some of the most popular questions. Also, we'll have a video recording of this webinar available in a few days on Sporty's YouTube channel, so you can check it out there if you missed something or if you want to share it with a friend. And also make sure to check out sportys.com/webinars. We have a host of webinars coming up this month, including one tomorrow at 2 o'clock called iPad Proficiency Check with Brett Kobe here from Sporties, and a number of other ones in the weeks ahead. So plenty of ways to stay engaged and learn. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil to dive into what's new with ForeFlight and how we can all get a little bit better in our pre-flight planning and our in-flight tools. Phil, take it away.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon to everybody. My name is Phil Inman. I'm with the ForeFlight Pilot Support Team. I'm glad to be able to join you today. I'm working from home, as I imagine most of you all are as well. Home to me is in the Woodlands, Texas, outside of Houston. We have an office here in Houston. And we're getting by, and I'm staying healthy, and today is a good day for two reasons: because I am healthy and my family's healthy, as I hope you all are too, and two, I get to talk about ForeFlight with a lot of great pilots who are either ForeFlight customers, and for that we thank you. And for those that may be taking a look at ForeFlight for the first time or kind of curious that you haven't jumped over to use our service, we welcome you, and I absolutely enthusiastically look forward to the opportunity to earn your business and maybe have you join the ForeFlight family. So with that, let's get started. As I said, my name is Phil Inman. I'm with the customer success team, which is part of our pilot support team, which is about 25 to 30 people. We've grown. Our mantra is that we are fanatics about pilot support, and we try very hard to be exactly that, to help you with problems, to help you with education, to help you with understanding how to use ForeFlight to the fullest. So with that, let's launch off into what we're doing. As John introduced, that one of our most popular series is just simply talking and reviewing what's new in ForeFlight. And it's probably been a year since we've done one of these. Last year's Sun and Fun or Oshkosh or some of the other flying conventions as well, maybe AOPA, things like that. We try to do what's new. So we're going to do one today. And we're going to cover only a handful of the topics that have been introduced in the last year. I didn't even take the time to do a count of how many we've done, but it's a lot. And you're going to see a list here momentarily. So we're going to go back into about mid-2019, and we're going to kind of capture everything going forward to the present day with that. But we're going to focus on, after we do that, some of what I'd consider the most leveraging new features that have been introduced in the last year. I think the title said advanced features or advanced usage of ForeFlight. So these are a little bit more on the advanced side. They apply to single engine, low and slow piston pilots like myself, to jet pilots that fly in the upper flight levels and fly across the oceans and on long missions as well. We're going to delve into a lot of the features that came out last month in I guess it would be May now, in version 12.4, which we probably believe was our most aggressive release we've ever done. And that's pretty incredible given the environment that we're operating in, but we are able to introduce a lot of really cool features, and I want to jump into some of those. And if I'll give it a little time throughout the thing, I want you to kind of listen to what I say and what I demonstrate. And I want you to focus on doing scenario planning for your flight mission. Yes, ForeFlight is a great tool in your toolbox. It comes on an iPad or an iPhone, or in many cases, you use it on ForeFlight Web on your computer. But it's more than a tool. It's formulating and doing the cognitive thinking that you want to do before you even take off, so that your flight goes more seamlessly. And should you be faced with any deviations or unplanned changes to your flight plan, whether it be an emergency or maybe just a simple reroute or something like that, you have done the proper planning in order to deal with that issue, not only efficiently, but also safely. So all in all, what we do here at ForeFlight and what we want to talk about, and keep in mind that we're talking about the total preparation of all three phases of flight planning. And those are the pre-flight planning phases, the en route execution of the flight, and let's not forget that we always should be doing some level of post-flight analysis of your flight. How did I do? Where was I weak? Was I exposed to any unnecessary risk to my flight? What do I want to do again? What do I need to practice? Things like those. So we're not going to focus specifically on just any one of these phases, but keep in mind, a lot of the tools I'm going to be showing you are applicable to every feature that we're going to be showing you. So let's have a quick overview of the feature releases since mid-2019. I would venture to guess that there's probably close to 50 of them. So I tried to do them in some groupings. These I grouped up into the base app, maps, and overlay features. And I'm just kind of going to read through these. And as I go through these and you look at the slide, take a look at some of these that maybe you missed, or maybe you don't understand exactly how they work. So go back and study it. And we have excellent ways to help you. You can obviously study on your own, but we have an excellent video series and support library on our website. And I'll show you the links to those at the end in case you're not familiar with where they are. Every single one of these has a video series associated with it. And every single one of them probably has at least one article in our support library that you can read on how it functions. So we've enhanced the nav logs. We've added a lot to map annotations. You longtime ForeFlighters, you remember it wasn't too long ago, you couldn't do annotations or draw on the map. You could draw on the plates, but you couldn't draw on the map. But we changed that in 11.6. We had US VFR flyweight charts for our most popular or crowded metropolitan areas, and we geo-referenced those. We've enhanced the tap and map layer functionality. We've included the resolution of base maps and map layers, tried to stay consistent with iOS theme support, tapping on distance rings. Runway NOTAMs are now available in the procedure advisor. New recommended route traits when you go off and build your flight. The altitude slider auto mode is now available. Quick access to airspace frequencies has been enhanced. New base map elements, tapping extended center lines for runway information, and then obviously SID and STAR aircraft type restrictions. So some of these may not be of interest to you if you're just a VFR pilot. Others are very applicable to your flight and you're going to want to know more. Going further, track logs, logbook, and checklists are popular features of ForeFlight, and we continue to improve these. We work bugs out of them. We try to make them more usable and better functionality. Better track log review and search capability. We've added track logs to your logbook entries now. If you have a G1000 on board, you can actually take the track log generated by that piece of avionics and download it into ForeFlight. In logbook, we've had a whole host of general improvements, endorsement additions, auto calculations of various types of flights, and autofills. And then in checklist, probably the most notable thing we did is that we have what we call checklist speak, where the checklist will actually read the checklist item off to you as you either walk around your airplane or survey the panel or the things going on inside. International, if any of you are international flyers, we've enhanced a lot of the features there. Nav Canada being a biggest one that probably may apply to this audience, as well as what we call an international navlog template. Now that's a little misleading but it's an alternative Navlog template that's available to our Performance Plus customers that you can go up and you can select as opposed to the traditional ForeFlight one. It's the same information, it's a different presentation. It's a matter of you deciding which one works best for you. And then miscellaneous items. We've continued to improve our flight sharing capability, organized over-the-ocean track system filtering, alternate airports are now included in our pack features, pricing, AOPA, FBO fees. FMS uplink was added with AirInc. We have internet radar coverage limits now depicted on the map overlays, additional location marker, and arrival time planning on flights as opposed to just ETD. So that is a summary, very quick, a whistle-stop tour of all the, we'll call the lesser, for lack of better words, features. But now we're going to focus on the big ones. And this is where we're going to spend our time today. And I hope that at least one of these is of interest to every single one of you and hopefully more. And my objective today is as we go through these, if you can come away individually with 2 or 3 things that you didn't know before you counted, before you signed up and clicked on attend this webinar, if you come away with 2 or 3 things, then I think the time you spend is a success, and I will have considered my job of teaching and exposing it to you a success as well. So with that, let's jump off. We've had takeoff and landing performance out there for a little while now, but it's still a feature that really isn't quite understood. And a lot of people write into us and they want to know more and things like that. So we're going to go through that in pretty great detail today. It's also called runway performance. It's also called TOLD, takeoff and landing distances. You may hear it called various things. Right now in ForeFlight, we only have that available for single pistons, but we are working on enhancing that for light twins, turboprops, and jets. And so this year, you're going to see another major rollout of this feature into the higher performing aircraft. 3D review and approach procedure review and airport view and things like that has kind of come out in phases. I think it's probably fair to say initially it was interpreted by many of our customers as being, oh, this is kind of cool. This is maybe a little bit even on the gimmicky side and all that. Oh no, it's grown a lot farther and faster than that. And it now is an extremely helpful tool on how you to plan your flight and then review your flight. So we're going to cover a little bit of that. And if you haven't seen that, because it's a Performance Plus feature only for performance subscribers, if you haven't seen it in action, pay close attention because this is something you may want to add. Files and documents has had a complete overhaul, and we're going to cover that there. That's helpful not only to group accounts like flight departments and things like that, but individuals can utilize this as well. And it's a very powerful tool contained within ForeFlight. Documents has always been there, but we have enhanced it greatly. We actually overhauled its presentation, and now you can attach files to an individual flight. We're going to cover that. We have several procedure enhancements that we're going to cover a few in the course of a few minutes as well, and then we're going to jump off into the 12.4 features, and you'll see that when you get to it, and I think most of you probably have at least seen those because it's quite recent. We're currently on 12.5.1. If you're not there on 12.5.1, I encourage you to visit the Apple App Store and update, but wait until after this webinar to do it. You don't need to be updating your iPad while you're following along. Okay, let's talk about takeoff and landing performance. This feature was developed, not only was it on our roadmap for a long time, but obviously huge customer demand to ensure safe takeoff and landings with a very fast and pilot interactive runway calculation model. And so we have done that. Now we're not building new physics here. We're not reinventing the wheel. We are taking published runway performance data provided by the manufacturers of your aircraft. We're combining it with current weather conditions and airport conditions as well. And we're coming up with the calculations there. If you have an issue, you're going to get a warning if it exceeds the limits. You can customize the inputs for easier scenario planning or declared distance requirements. There's no user setup required other than having your airplane configured in aircraft. And this is included in ForeFlight performance subscription plans. So don't get the idea that this is only for the high performing aircraft. This works on grass landing strips. It works in dry and wet pavement environments and things like that. It will give you, based on manufactured data, a good indication of the type of numbers that you can expect to perform at. Now, initially, when we released this feature, we released it with a safety factor of 1.0. In other words, no safety factor built into it. That has since been changed. And so that was a result of us knowing we had to do that plus pilot feedback. And so now you can put in a safety factor of 1.0 and 10.0. Now that's a huge spread. And I'm going to give you a little guidance on maybe some numbers that are realistic to use for various scenarios. And that guidance actually comes from the FAA. That's not something I've made up. And keep in mind that I'm using the word guidance because for general aviation piston pilots, there is no requirement on the safety factor that you're required to use. Now, you move up into the Part 135 operations or 121 and start flying big jets or high-performing aircraft, that statement will change. There are requirements, but we're not going to cover that today. And we're going to cover the inputs that you've got to address. So when you go into your aircraft type, and if you're using ForeFlight performance profiles, which you should be if you're on a ForeFlight performance plan, you're going to see that we have, for a given model, and this happens to be a TBM 900, we show that we have 3 ForeFlight performance profiles. Those are the en route profiles. Those include climb, cruise, and descent. And when you go into one of those, and this is kind of a quick review, you're going to see the various profiles that we have built for a given aircraft. These, again, are taken straight from the pilot operating handbook or the aircraft flight manual. So in this case, we're going to pick one. And in there, you're not seeing a whole bunch of numbers. We have taken those data, tables, charts, graphs, and we have digitized them so a computer can use them to come up with calculations. And so that's what we've done. And we don't present those numbers because our goal here is not to give you a bunch of numbers. The numbers are the numbers. But what we do give you are adjustments in the form of cruise speed and fuel flow that you can make up or down if you find through trial and error that ForeFlight has a tendency to typically overcalculate or undercalculate speed or fuel flow. And you're probably going to find, if you are studious enough and pay attention close enough, that we are probably off a little bit. In fact, it will be off from one model to the next. So my Cessna 182 will be different than the 182 sitting next to me on the ramp, even though they're the same model. So you can go in and adjust that, what we call bias slider, up or down, run some more flights, and we will add or subtract a certain percentage, usually pretty small, out of the calculations we make from that point forward. Once we do that, we'll save it, we'll make it the default, and then it will come up. And every time we begin a flight plan, then that profile will be the default profile. So now let's get to the takeoff and landing performance, which are there. When you see that, that means that that aircraft has takeoff and landing performance capability. So when you click on that, you're going to get a quick number. Well, I'm sorry, let's back up. This is my aircraft here. And if you notice that we've got runway profiles with a serial number range. Now, it's possible that depending on your aircraft, your serial number may be outside that range. And if it is, we want you to contact us, because what it probably means is that the pilot operating handbooks and the aircraft flight manuals that we have simply only cover a limited range, and we haven't had the opportunity to get a hold of some of those operating manuals. So if you send us your operating manual, we can look at it, and we'll either build another profile, which would appear here as a second line, and then you would select the one where your serial number falls, or we would expand that one and say we might go from serial number 1 through 999 if we determine that 1 through 345 fit 346 through 999. That's our heavy lifting. That's not your burden to carry, but bring it to our attention if you think you fall outside that range. Okay, once you do that and you start planning your flight in flights, you will notice in this case that we now have takeoff and landing buttons next to the departure and destination airport. So when you tap that, like right there, there's the landing, there's the takeoff. We're going to start with the takeoff, and we're going to go through the calculation methodology. Now, when you start here in this particular flight plan, it doesn't know what runway I'm going to take off from here at David Wayne Hooks. This is my local airport here in the North Houston area. So we're going to go ahead and select the runway. It does have the latest METAR. In this case, it located the TAF issued 9 minutes ago. It's probably because the flight time is off in the future from when I made this slide, but that's basically the latest weather for my estimated time of departure. And then when I go to the runways, I can select which one it is. Now we're color coding and helping you out. Green is obviously good. You've got a headwind. It also shows the crosswind component. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select 17 right, which is the big runway there at Hooks. And I'm going to select that, and now it's populated. And if you know right away, notice right away, it did calculations. I mean, this is instantaneous. So I've now got dry paved conditions. That's where it's going to start out at. It's calculating a total distance of 451 feet required. And if I wanted to change that dry paved conditions, I would tap on it and I would go to something else. I might go to slippery paved. And I select that, and notice that the distance changed instantly to 3186. So it just redid the calculations for slippery paved surface as opposed to a dry paved surface. There's the 3186. And down below, now I'm back at the dry paved again, because I just made this slide here. It shows the weight of my aircraft, and down below it shows my critical calculations, my rotate speed, my ground roll, my 50-foot distance speed, and the total distance required to get over that 50-foot obstacle. And those are the calculations for takeoff. Now there's the safety factor, 1.0. Let's change that to 2.0. And if you noticed, everything doubled. It just doubled everything. Now my ground roll is 3550, and my total distance is 4901, shown at the bottom and also shown at the top. So now let's move over to landing. We're going to be landing. This particular flight happens to go from David Wayne Hooks up to Eagle County, Colorado. I'm landing at altitude, and we're going to be looking at several parameters here on things we can cover and change. These all you are capable. I can change the runway. I've already selected runway 25. I can change the runway conditions. I've got dry paved. I can change, or please make note that it's got the current weather, always a good time, or current weather of the time of arrival. In this case, it's based on the MOS issued 38 minutes ago. It shows my landing weight. Notice also my landing weight is lighter than when I took off. It took into account the fuel that I consumed flying from the Houston area up to Eagle County, Colorado. And it shows my landing configuration, that I'm in landing configuration here. Okay, there's my runway conditions. Runway 25 is the proper one. Make sure that's selected. And there's the calculations. There's my weight. My approach speed is going to be 80 knots. My touchdown speed at 66. Total distance required 2,562. 1,600 of it actually on the ground. Okay. Let's look at some of these conditions we can vary. Dry paved, safety factor. You know, I could say, well, the forecast is expecting a wind of 10 knots. Maybe I'm going to lessen that. I want a little more conservative approach. What if the wind isn't 10 knots? What if it's something else? So it's in blue, you can change it. And it's also predicting a temperature of 28 degrees Celsius. What if they're off a few degrees? What kind of calculations do I get? I'm doing scenario planning now. I'm planning for worst case conditions. So in that case, I changed every one of them. And I changed them to pretty drastic conditions. Slippery paved, I took the winds totally out. I'm now in calm air. I ratcheted it up all the way to 34 degrees Celsius. That's 6 degrees higher than the forecasted temperature. That's probably overdoing it, but I'm probably trying to illustrate a point. And I built in a landing safety factor of 2.4. And notice that I got a warning at the top that my total landing distance exceeds that which is available by 89 feet. Now, this is kind of a perfect storm scenario, I grant you that, but I'm trying to demonstrate the fact that you can play with these, and you as a pilot can become very understanding as to the factors that go into your landing calculations and the amount of variability that may exist due to any one condition. So you might want to play with one at a time. You might want to play with multiple at a time. That's up to you. So what did we do? We put various numerous parameters into play to test the sensitivity and the associated risk with each one. And those were runway surface conditions, wind speed and direction, temperature, and altimeter. And well, actually, I didn't change the altimeter, but you could. I also changed the safety factor, and this is going to be where I mentioned the safety factor. Now, there was a document that was released, I think, back in 2018, called SAFO 19001, which is the result, and many of you probably remember, a Southwest Airlines jet overrunning, I believe, at Midway Airport, the end of the runway. They embarked on a 13-year study to study that and the calculations associated with that. And they actually recommend a safety factor of 1.67 for dry, perfect runway conditions. So let's take a look at this. And this is actually a table that's contained in SAFO 19001. And there's the link to it. You can Google it and find it easily out there on the web. This is one that the FAA recommends for safety factors for various conditions. So most of us here in attendance at this meeting are reciprocating aircraft pilots. So let's just focus on the bottom line. That's where the 1.67 comes in play, dry conditions. But if your conditions of your runway deteriorate or even deteriorate significantly down to poor conditions, look how the safety factors grow. You could conceivably go from 1.67 to 5.1 at the urging of the FAA. I'm going to leave it to you as the pilot to use your discretion as to what safety factor is appropriate. I think experience is going to play a factor in this, but we're simply providing you a vehicle to educate yourself as reasonably as possible with all aspects of your flight, including takeoff and landing calculations. So with that, we're going to move on to the next feature that we want to talk about, and that's 3D. As I mentioned, initially introduced, it was just airport 3D view. But then we added 3D review in a camera mode. We're going to demonstrate that. And most recently, we added 3D approach review. These are all performance plus features again. So let's talk about the airport view as well. Now, I'm apologizing in advance. You're getting ready to see a couple animated slides. Because I'm working from home, I'm not sure my internet and Wi-Fi has the bandwidth for me to show these animations. They're all very short and talk at the same time. So if my voice happens to get choppy, that's a technical issue. It's not your fault or your problem, but we'll work through it. So just bear with me. In this case, I'm looking at Eagle County Regional Airport in Eagle, Colorado. There's the airport view, and there's the 3D view button. So when I tap that, I get a pictorial aerial map view of Eagle County, Colorado. Now you can take your finger and move it around. And so we're going to watch this in action, and we're going to talk about what we did here just in a second. That's runway 7, runway 25. Tilting up. Okay, that's Eagle County, Colorado. Now that gives you a good idea of the kind of airport you're going into and what to expect. If you were taking off runway 25, and notice the 25's up, you see you got some hills or mountains off. If you were taking off, that you got to deal with. It's just a good situational awareness tool for you to use when you're going in or out of an airport that maybe you're just not completely familiar with. So play with it at home, get accustomed to moving that thing around and seeing it from all different angles. Now, if you notice in the upper left in those black bars, it shows you the altitude and the glide approach. Right now, we're at a 15.8 degree approach. If we were to hit the end of the runway, 1,630 feet, 38 feet. So now, other than runway, airport, you can pick, as long as you're connected to the internet, you can pick any space out there and decide and take a 3D view. So I just picked this. This is not random. This is planned. But I picked this place. You'll see here in a minute where this is. And I just tapped on it. And when I tapped on it, this is similar to creating like a user waypoint or using your finger to tap on the map. And you notice it gives me the coordinates up there, but in the upper right hand corner is a 3D button. So I'm going to tap that and let's see where we are. In case you didn't know, this is Mount St. Helens. Excellent visual detail. So that's 3D, and that's kind of where we started. So we want to use 3D for review now. This is the second phase of this of the rollout, where we're going to be able to follow planned and recorded flights from a third-person view of the aircraft. In other words, you're outside the aircraft looking at the aircraft and the route line, or you can do it from the cockpit. You can scrub through this flight using the built-in timeline. You simply use your finger, or you can autoplay it at one of about 5 different speeds from 1x to 20x for a faster overview. And there's the first person and third person mode, and it allows you to pan and tilt. I'm going to demonstrate that here in a minute. Just like it does on the map, the route line will appear as a blue curtain for easy viewing. I should say similar to what it does on a track log. It does record with the track log. If you have an AHRS capable device, it will incorporate pitch and bank data into this with the movements in the third person view. And this is a performance plan feature only. So let's take a look at this. We built this flight plan again from David Wayne Hooks up to Eagle County, Colorado. There's our flight plan, there's our approach. And there is the 3D button right now, a little globe with an airplane spinning around. So we're going to tap that. And now here's our 3D view of our flight. Now this is done in advance. We have not flown this yet. So again, this is an animated slide. I want you to notice I'm starting out in the cockpit. Notice the icons down on the left. The blue one is lit up with the airplane outside the, or the V is coming from the cockpit, whereas the bottom one, the V is coming from outside the cockpit. So I'm going to switch back and forth here, but let's see what this looks at. I'm panning around. I'm in third person view. And I want you to notice also that the active leg, just like on the map, is depicted as a magenta line, and the past leg, the ones that we've already flown, have switched to yellow, just like it does on the map. That's 3D view, and we could go through and I could show you animations all day long, but we're not going to do that. We got a lot to cover. But you can slide, you can grab the scale down at the bottom and slide if you want to go through it real fast. You can, the box in the upper right hand corner that starts at KDWH and then Dremmer and then Littled and then Beltway. You can scroll up or down and skip ahead. Say if I wanted to tap Beltway, it would take me right to Beltway. The last feature in the 3D review is the 3D approach review. This allows you to preview the approach procedure in the maps view by tapping the 3D procedure review. I'll demonstrate that. It depicts every waypoint along the route, including speed and altitude restrictions, as you'll see here shortly, if in fact they have them. There's an interactive nav log at the top right, just like there was on 3D review, allowing the viewing of any particular waypoint, starting, backing up, things like that, and the distances. And the use of the set altitude speed option is displayed in 3D view here. So if you do use that in your flight plan, it will be depicted. So we now have a procedure loaded up here, the Valaxa LDA runway 25 into Eagle County. And there's the 3D procedure review. I tap that button and tap 3D procedure review. And then we have this. Now I did a quickie on you just for interest. This is actually an airport in Switzerland, but I wanted to demonstrate it because it's a little more interesting to look at. This is very fast. I'm using my finger to slide that scale down at the bottom. Now, I selected this 3D review instead of the one at Eagle County because there were several things I want you to take notice of. If you go back, in fact, we can back up. Let's look at this again. Very mountainous terrain. We're staying above there. There's the approach fixes along with the hard altitude restrictions. We have to cross GS 601 at 17,000 feet minimum, along with 602, the next one. So those are all depicted there. You're also going to notice the valley that we're going to be flying into. So if you review this, and if you've never been to this airport before, you're going to kind of want to know these things. So there's a lot of scenario planning and a lot of preparation that 3D approach review can be of benefit. So you look at this again, you can see the color changes of the legs. Now we're dropping altitude. Down to the runway. That's approach review, and that's the conclusion of our 3D review, 3D features. Let's move on to documents. Documents were completely overhauled in 2019, made it easier to find, to download, and to access documents than ever before. It's included now in the unified app search for easy location from anywhere within the app. There's a collapsible drawer on the left, allowing quick movement between custom binders and what we call now drives. That's a whole new paradigm for country or provider specific documents, and we'll show you a few of those. We can see both a tiled and or a thumbnail view or a condensed list view. So you can pretty much decide on which view you prefer to see, and it does support nested folders. You can download documents individually or download the entire folder. So for some, you're not too worried about downloading every time a new version comes out. Others, that may be different. So let's take a look. If you noticed, and if you remember documents from before this overhaul, we called this Documents 2.0, this is completely different. We have user-made binders at the top. In this case, I have created one I call handbooks and then one I call my documents. And in my handbooks, I have downloaded the Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge and the Airplane Flying Handbook, as well as the owner's manual to my Stratus 2. In imported, or my Dropbox, I have linked. Imported are going to be documents that come to you via side loading using a cable and hooking up to iTunes, or more commonly, and probably most commonly, documents that you email yourself and then you save them to your documents. And the Dropbox, obviously, is I've created a Dropbox on my computer, and then I have set up my account to link to that Dropbox. And so then anytime I add a document to my Dropbox, it will sync over and move onto my iPad as well. These drives are common drives that we control, and there's a lot of them, depending on your subscription type and the region for which you have subscribed. But of note here, you are probably most common are going to be FAA and ForeFlight and Jeppesen. And for any Canadian subscribers we may have listening, we have one for Nav Canada. These are going to be documents provided by them. So imported documents, I emailed these to myself, and we support all different types of document types. In this case, I happen to have a PDF file, I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I have a picture, an image. In my Dropbox, I have all sorts of other things, and notice that I have nested folders that I set up in my Dropbox account so that my main Dropbox is my initials PRI, but I also have a folder for airspace and other ones down below that I cannot see the title. I would have to scroll down to see those. But if I go into the ForeFlight drive, these are ones that are always available to you because we load these drives with these documents. And notice I have a filing document, I have the mobile legends, I have a ICAO code quick reference guide. If you scroll down, I probably have a logbook document, I have the pilot's guide for ForeFlight manual, for ForeFlight pilots and things like that. But I want to draw attention here to the download functionality that you now have available. I can download that mobile legends by just tapping that blue button, and it will download to the latest version. Or if I want to keep my ForeFlight documents up to date, I can download the entire drive folder by clicking that one. It says that'll take 29 megabytes of data. So why would I do one and not the other? Well, if you have a storage issue or concern on your device, you may not want to download every ForeFlight document. You may only want certain ones. That's your choosing. But if you don't, you might want to download them all. Keep in mind, if you want to use your iPad while not connected to the internet, it's very similar to maps and plates. You're going to have them downloaded in order to read them and view them. Otherwise, you have to be connected to the internet. That little icon up there will switch us over to list view. So instead of seeing icon view, it will present it as such as list view. And notice you've got the individual download buttons in blue, and you also got that master download button in the upper right in blue with the 29 megabyte below it. As I said, we import all sorts of documents. You can do it via AirDrop, email, iTunes, or a connected cloud document. You do have to have a Pro Plus subscription or above in order to use these document type download features. We support all these different types of files. I'm not familiar with too many that most users are going to use that we do not support. We also now have the capability of adding files to your flights. So we switch gears on files, and it's pretty much the same list, but we can attach files, documents, and photos to a particular flight plan. And there's several ways to do that. There's a files button at the top of the flight. You can import them via AirDrop. You can drag and drop from the slide overview, which we're going to cover here in a few minutes. And you can attach scratch pads from the scratch tab view. Wide range supported, as I stated before, and you can annotate these while viewing in flights, rename them, send them off to someone else using iOS Share. These also do sync between all your devices. So if you do it on your iPad, it's going to show up on your iPhone or on your second iPad. This is a performance plan feature only, files in flight. So how does this work? When you're in flights mode, you'll probably notice that we now have an additional button just to the right of the briefing button, and it's called files. In this case, it's not populated. We have 0 files. So if you tap on that, it will tell me I don't have anything attached yet. So I'm going to tap that plus button, and then I'm going to be given choices. Where do you want these documents to come from? Do you want them to be photos from your photo library? Do you want them to be ForeFlight documents, or do you want them to come from files that are on your hard drive or someplace in your files folder? So you make those selection, you cruise and add the ones you want. In this case, you might be adding ForeFlight documents. There's the photos, there's the files. And then after you add a few, it will show you how many files you added. So before we move on, what kind of files would I want to add to a particular flight? Well, you might want to have a hardcover copy of your briefing, or maybe you did a weight and balance summary sheet. You might want to add that. You might want to add instructions on where to get the rent car and where you're driving to at your destination airport. It could be anything, maybe a particular picture or something like that. It's user choice. And we just make it easier, and then that's associated with that flight, and it stays with that flight. All right, we're done with documents. Let's talk now about procedure enhancements. These are pretty quick, but I think they're worth noting more than just reading them off from a list. First one I want to talk about is unsupported SID and star legs using a dotted line route. And you may have noticed this because it's been around almost a year. This came out in 11.4. And the situation is that when you depart many airports, your initial entry into that SID is actually not at the airport. And this is one at my home airport where the initial entry into that SID is waypoint Dremer. Well, when I take off from 17 right, I'm most likely going to be given radar vectors by Tower or by Tracon on how to get to Dremer. We don't know exactly how those are. They're not standard. So we simply depict it as a dotted line from the airport to your entry point of the SID. And that simply tells you that you're kind of going to get there on your own with guidance and instructions from flight following, Tracon Center, Tower, whoever it is you're talking to. Alternate advisor came out 11.5. When you tap on the alternate in building your flight plan, you're now given some suggested alternates, and we're giving you the latest weather, at least in this case, at the time of arrival. In this case, these are alternates to Eagle County, and it's showing in the green. So all of those are currently VFR, and it's showing you how far it is, how many gallons of fuel it's going to take to get over there, and the type of approaches that they have. You know, plus a very brief summary of the airport. So at Aspen, for example, there's the wind condition. It is a towered airport. They got 8,000 feet of pavement to work with, and they got a localizer VOR and RNAV procedure available to me. It helps your selection of an alternate get a little bit easier without ever leaving the flight planning page. Select runway on the maps. Came out in 11.5. So when you select that runway, in this case, I'm going to tap on David Wayne hooks, and it's going to say select the runway. So I'm going to go to that, and in this case, I'm going to pick 17 right because it's the longest and the primary runway there at hooks. And now you see that it changes to 17 right. Well, it did a couple other things as well. When I selected that runway, if you look closely and zoom in on the departure airport, you notice the chevrons that are now overlaid onto the runway. That's going to help you with your situational awareness and making sure you're on the right runway when you take off. So I'm looking for 17 right, and as I zoom in on that, and I don't have a slide to depict it, you're kind of looking for the chevron. So again, it's just helping you with the situational awareness of that. Now on your landing runway into Eagle County, if I select that runway, in this case I selected runway 25, notice the approach course has chevrons on it. Again, it's helping you depict and select and confirm that you are in fact lined up for the right runway. Just another little safety feature that we've added. Enhanced approach or procedure markers. We talked briefly about this, but if you look, we now have crossing altitudes at various points, such as the final approach fix and any intermediate fix, and even way out at the initial approach fix, I've got a speed restriction, and it's depicted on the map. NOTAM warnings in the route editor. I'm sure almost everybody has probably seen these little red exclamation marks in the bubbles up there in your flight plan editor. If you haven't tapped on it to see what it is, tap on it, and it right away tells you view alert. There's a NOTAM. In this case, I'm using Houston Intercontinental. And if I tap on that right there, it will take me to the NOTAM page. And it will give you the two that are probably most applicable to that. But if you're interested in seeing them all, just simply tap the green, and it will show you all the NOTAMs for that airport. Georeference SIDS and stars in the procedure advisor. This requires Jeppesen because only the Jeppesen plates are georeferenced, but most SIDS and stars are now georeferenced, and you can actually throw them up there on the map as this is depicted. It helps oftentimes with the selection of which SID and star, especially out of a busy airport where you got multiple SIDs and stars to choose from. Plain text PIREPs on maps. If you tap on a PIREP now, you get a little better description of what that PIREP is all about. Yeah, we still got the code up there at the top that you kind of have to interpret. As you see 43 minutes ago, I can let you interpret that. It's up around Amarillo on my flight from Houston. But down at the bottom, it noticed exactly where that PIREP was reported, and when it was reported, it was during climb, and what the turbulence was. In this case, continuous, light, occasional, moderate. So I don't have to know all those codes. It's a little more plain English for PIREPs. Make sure you have the PIREP overlay in order to see the PIREPs. If you're looking on the map for PIREPs and you don't have the PIREP overlay on, you're not going to see it. Finally, marked positions. This is a cool feature. Came out in 12.3, has numerous applications. For anybody that does search and rescue, you're really going to want to look at this and study it up. This will drop markers along the route during flight, and then viewers share those afterwards. So these are not breadcrumbs, which we added a while back. These are actual markers. Think of these almost as the initial stages of a user waypoint. And when you do that, you're going to capture the time, the GPS coordinates, the altitude, the speed, and allow for notes in each of these markers. You can rename them. You can change any values. The only thing you can't change is the time. You can save them to a user waypoint so you can use them in future flights. They will disappear 15 minutes after your flight. So if you're going to annotate them and save them, be sure you do that before the 15 minutes is over with. But it will be included. They'll roll over and be included in your track log and in your flights view if they are active during the active time of your flights. You can take these marked positions for viewing in other apps, such as Google Earth. They'll show up. And this too is a performance plan feature only. So how do these work? Well, first of all, you got to turn it on. So in your settings up there, go to the gear icon, which is your settings, and down below you'll see, there's the gear icon. Down below you'll see the marked position. So turn that on so it highlights blue. And when you do turn that on, you're going to get a little teardrop shaped icon over on the left. That's your marked position. So anytime when you're flying and you hit that little icon on the left, it's going to drop that little bright green marker. And if you tap on that, it's going to give you the description box. It allows you to give it a name and any other information. In this particular case, it doesn't have speed because I did this here in the office. But if I was out flying, there would be a speed associated with that. There's the time. Well, before I leave that, there's the time and things like that. So that will be saved. Feel free to save these, experiment with these. And you know, what I have done, and I've done it twice, the best way to understand this is probably go out to our video library and look for the 5-minute video of runway marked, of marked positions, and watch that, because Sam, who does those videos, goes into great detail on how this works. It's well worth your time if you think this is a feature that you are going to use, and I bet you that most of you feel that way. So let's go back into 12.4 and 12.5. We're going to throw one or two things. This was an aggressive, impressive release that we did back in May. We added internet traffic via FlightAware. I hope most of you had a chance to dial this up. It's very, very simple. You do not need a FlightAware subscription. This is all done through ForeFlight. We stream live global traffic directly from FlightAware directly into the app. We use the same traffic layer to display ADS-B traffic, and is accessible anytime you have internet while you're on the ground. You can do it from home, you can do it from the airport, but you lose it when you disconnect from the internet. If you disconnect from the internet and switch over to ADS-B, it will do that automatically as long as you have an external ADS-B device. It displays the airborne and ground traffic via the internet, just like ADS-B traffic. It'll tell you the altitude, tail number, all at a glance, and many other details when you tap on it. It uses the distinct position reports that we get from FlightAware to interpolate movements, and therefore it's very smooth movement on the map. And unlike some of the other features, and I know some of you may be rolling your eyes, this is not a Performance Plus feature only. This is available to everybody, regardless of subscription plan. So how does it work? You go to the map view, make sure you have the traffic layer enabled up on top, and just watch the graph and you'll see everything move. Zoom in. See the movement, smooth. Tap on one, United Flight 1492 with speed. It's a Boeing 737. There's another flight. Zoom in. You see one airplane on short final about to hit the runway on runway 09. And the beige targets are ground traffic. And data flow permissible, if you tap on those, you'll get some description on those as well. I didn't do that. That is internet traffic. Pretty cool feature. Don't have to go to FlightAware. We handle it for you through our alliance and with FlightAware. And many thanks to those people in assisting us with that great feature. Slide out more menu and edit tab editor. If you've noticed this, we rearranged the more button at the bottom right. It's now a compact menu on the right side. And you can rearrange those features. Let's back up. Downloads and settings and other frequent tabs. Most tabs open full screen. In this case, if you open one, you just simply swipe down and it will disappear. Most tabs open full screen, double column layouts for better viewing. That's what I'm depicting there. Notice the column on the left of all my track logs and then the track log on the right. The last tab opened is now at the bottom, just to the left of more. So the last tab I opened is track logs. It now appears at the bottom. I don't need to go to the more menu. Edit the tab order, very simple. tap the edit tab order. You get those 3 parallel lines on the right side of each one. Take your finger and move them around to your heart's delight, just like that. And the tab order, though, however, does not sync between your devices. So if you do it one way on your iPad, you're going to have to go do it to your iPhone. We have made the iPhone in closer parity to the iPad now. If you notice that everything on the flight plan looks pretty much like the iPad now. All the features is there. The one feature we do not have, for those of you that have a subscription plan to support it, is profile view, but everything else is pretty much just like the iPad. Multitasking support on the iPad. You've got the ability to split the screen or slide over, and you can open that screen with another supported app. And then if there's any unsupported apps, you can slide it over. Now, Brett, I believe with Sporties tomorrow during the iPad presentation is going to cover this. So I encourage you to tune in to his presentation and see if he demonstrates this. But this is a quick video of how it works. If you noticed, I went back and forth from working on ForeFlight and left to kind of looking through ESPN for some of the articles of interest to me on the right. Aircraft type restrictions in the procedure advisor. If you notice that we have, when you pull up the procedure advisor, if they're limited, in this case, Backer 4 is jets only, Dryer 2 is jets only, and then Nander 3 is jets only, and then we got a turboprop and piston 1 only down at the bottom. And then a few more in 12.4, we rearranged the frequencies, AFDs, and tabs in the airport view. Just spend some time, get familiar with those. The maps, we've moved some of the buttons around. Some of the quick buttons on the left are now quick filters and things like that. And our support on the bottom is also different now. And we now have a tab just strictly for support as opposed to being buried in some of the other tabs. And then in 12.5, just came out, we have airport hotspots. If you look on the airport diagram, this is Houston Hobby Airport. You can see the hotspots outlined in orange. Brings quick attention to your eyes that you need to be careful there. And then, believe it or not, everybody cheer. We now have a timer in ForeFlight. Probably one of the most requested features of all time. Tap more at the bottom, the timer shows up on the right. It's a count up timer in this case, just tap at the start. Or you can tap that and it will be tap to set, tap that, and now it becomes a countdown timer. In this case, I got it set for 2 minutes. I would hit that, tap to start, and it will start counting down. It will work in the background as well. You can set that. So now if you're timing your approaches or time of arrival between fixes or maybe a fuel tank swap, you now have a timer in ForeFlight. And then offline address search, this is performance plans only. We now have a new download. If you're interested in this, download the street addresses. That's another file that you'll be downloading in the download folder. And then when you're offline, you can download or search for particular street addresses. Very handy for search and rescue, probably more than anybody. So with that, those are the topics we're going to conclude with. We're going to open up Q&A here in a minute, but here is how you find many of our other resources. Our pilot's guide is online or in the app. I showed you where it was in the app, but it's online at www.foreflight.com. There's the link to our video series, foreflight.com/videos. As always, if you get hung up, if you have a question, if you can't get something figured up, if you need assistance with getting set up or how to learn how to do something, or God forbid, if you find a bug in ForeFlight, and yes, we do have bugs, and most of the time, or oftentimes, our bugs are reported to us by our pilots, please email us and let us know because we want to address it. Sign up for some of our webinars. Sporties has a great series. We've got a few too. We have our pilot and command series as well as our ForeFlight on frequency series. And so with that, John, I'll let you take over, and I got plenty of time to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Phil. Fantastic presentation. I know I was following along on my iPad, tapping and learning some things myself. So thanks for all the insight there. And for all those attending, please feel free to keep the questions coming. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Phil, I'll throw a couple your way. One question on kind of vertical descent and maybe what tools are available right now, and then maybe if there's any plans to add more of that in terms of, crossing restrictions, maybe cross 40 south of the airport at 6,000 feet, that type of thing. Is there a way to do that right now in ForeFlight?
Yes, in the app you can go in your. Let me pull up my iPad as well. When you're in your flight plan and you're building a route, uh, you can have a set altitude and speed of a particular waypoint. So if you have the waypoint in your route plan, tap on that waypoint, and then you can set the altitude and speed. I hope I'm answering your question. And so if you have a waypoint, I'm just making up a name. If waypoint Orion, I need to cross it at 150 knots and or 5,000 feet, then it will build it into your flight plan to be at 5,000 feet when you cross Orion. And it will do all the calculations accordingly. And that would go for en route as well as descent type mode and things like that. So it's pretty much at a particular waypoint, you're going to tell yourself that you're going to be at a particular point. Now, another way to do this, now this is not in direct answer to your question, but there is a feature out there. If you look at a route between 2 points, and let me get one pulled up, and because I want to give you the proper name, is called a long track offset. If you tap on the bubble of a waypoint or an airport or anything like that, you can say, I'll give you an example, 20 miles before I reach waypoint Orion, I need to do something. And so you may, it's kind of making a note to yourself that you're going to take an action at that point. And maybe that's where you have determined by your own calculations that you're going to begin a descent, or you're going to make a radio call, or it's almost like making a note to yourself. And you can't necessarily set an altitude or a speed at that point, but you can put it in your flight plan where you know there's an action necessary. Does that answer the question, John, or am I a little off?
No, I think so, and I think you've at the very least given them folks somewhere to look to do a little more investigation there. So thank you.
Now, John, before we move on, that's an excellent example because I'm not sure if I'm following the question exactly. For the users that wrote that question, and I apologize if I missed the mark on what you did, please email us. That's the kind of thing we want people to reach out to us, and then be as descriptive as possible as to, I want to learn how to do this, or this is what I'm trying to accomplish in my flight plan. You mentioned vertical descent or a crossing altitude or things like that. Be as descriptive as possible, then either myself or one of my many colleagues in the pilot support team will engage in a conversation with you via email, or if necessary, we'll call you and we'll walk you through what we can or cannot do to accomplish that objective.
Great. Thanks, Phil. A couple questions came in here on the runway analysis tool that you showed off with lots of capability there. And a couple of folks were wondering about experimental aircraft. Is there a way to use that feature if you've got an experimental or home-built aircraft?
No, there is not. And here's the reason why. You have to have a ForeFlight performance profile built for the aircraft in order to use takeoff and landing at this time. And the reason we don't have experimental aircraft and home-built aircraft is there's too much variation in the performance. They're not all the same. And so the decision was made at a much higher level than me within ForeFlight that we just weren't at this point in time going to go down that road of building ForeFlight performance profiles for experimental aircraft.
Okay, fair enough. On the 3D tool, is that something you will have to use pre-flight, or is that something you could download and use in flight as well?
It's not helpful in flight because of the, actually you can pack it, and there is some in-flight capability of using 3D along your corridor. If you pack, you should be able to view your alternate airport and your destination airport. But by and large, it's used pre-flight and post-flight in preparation, as well as connection, post-flight analysis. But if you're just flying along and you see something down below you and say, "Oh, I wonder what that looks like," and all that, you're not connected to the internet, so you're not getting all those graphics and those aerial views onto your device. So it's most likely not going to work. There is some limited 3D usage in the air, but I would not plan on it. It's a little bit difficult to explain, and to be honest with you, it's a little bit scattered as to when it applies and when it doesn't. It's pretty much limited to only points along your route, such as destination, departure airports, or maybe an alternate that might be right below you.
Okay. Couple questions on, let me see here, a couple around a similar topic, and it was with regard to the timer. How do I know when the time has expired? Is it audio? Is it visual? Is there a certain screen I have to be on? If the iPad's asleep, sort of walk through the notifications there for the timer.
It should be both. It should be visual as well as audio. I'm testing mine right now, but it will, assuming you have your volume on, it will, it basically will talk to you. Now, I don't think it has like a bell sounding or anything like that, but if you're familiar with some of the alerts that we have, like entering runway 25 or 500 feet AGL or 2 miles to final approach or something like that, the lady on ForeFlight will talk to you and say timer expired, or give you some type of notice, as well as a pop-up menu will appear. So it's a combination of audio and visual, but make sure test in advance, because if you're relying on the audio, you need to determine on your particular device if you got your volume set up loud enough where you're going to hear it in your headsets, or it's going to draw attention to yourself. But obviously, you're also going to have it on the lower right-hand corner of the ForeFlight screen, so you can kind of pay attention out of the corner of your eye.
Okay, great. Let's see here. We're running out of time, so we just want to pick one or two more here for you, Phil, that came up. On the back to runway, some more questions on that. A couple of folks asked about how to change. You mentioned sort of wet runway versus dry runway, and how you'd set that up in the takeoff or landing performance calculations. Remind us again kind of how that works. Can I set wet runway, or do I just have to apply a factor, or how does that work if I want to account for a wet or a snowy runway?
You can actually set it. Now, when you do it initially, you create your flight from departure airport to destination airport. And when you look at, say, your takeoff calculation, you'll tap that box. It's going to default to dry paved. You can tap that dry paved, and it will give you a pop-up window to give you choices of alternatives, such as dry paved, wet paved, slippery paved, maybe dry grass, whatever the case may be. So you want to take a look at that. Now, those choices are available to you, the same with the landing. The alternative is that you can just leave that alone and then go to safety factors and apply a safety factor that you believe are applicable. Those changes are additive. So if you go from dry paved to, let's say, wet paved, and you change your safety factor from 2.0 to 3.67, I'm just using examples, then those are going to all add up into longer calculations. So it's not one or the other. What I would encourage everybody to do is, especially at your home airport, get familiar with the choices that you're provided and for which runways you're provided those choices, and then make some calculations, practicing with departures in various weather conditions, and see if you agree with those. I think most people are familiar with about how much runway it takes on an average summer day to get off the pavement and then get up to high enough to clear a 50-foot obstacle if they pitch at VX or VY in a landing configuration. and they know those numbers are reasonable. So in my Cessna, if it says 2,200 feet, that's reasonably close. I understand that. And then, but if it's wet, then I change it to a wet pavement, or I change the safety factor, and all of a sudden it says I need 4,300 feet. I understand why it did that. Or if I go from dry to wet, then what's the magnitude of the change? I mean, before you start this, if you had never done this before, you're probably asking yourself, well, when I take off, does a wet runway add 100 feet or does it add 1,000 feet? Well, this is intended to help you with guidance on how much that does. And then you can also maybe reverse engineer it and say, I've got 7,000 feet available. What kind of, and I'm gonna leave all the factors the same, what kind of safety factors does it take for me to get to 7,000 feet required? And if you get a safety factor of 8.6, then you might say, oh, I'm very comfortable with that. I know I can get off, because that's an overkill. So there's a lot of different ways to use that. And I think everybody's situation is going to be different because we're all flying different airplanes. We're flying in different configurations. We're flying at different altitudes, atmospheric conditions. It's all about giving you the tools to do those scenarios and test it for yourself and see what works for you, as well as some awareness as to how much risk am I at, especially when I might be landing someplace I'm not familiar. How much risk am I at that they only got 4,000 feet? How much risk do I have that I might have to use every bit of it?
Okay, great. I'm going to give you one more, Phil, and then let you take a break. This one had to do with documents. You showed us a lot with documents. Is there a limit to how many documents a pilot can put in there, either number or megabytes, gigabytes? What is there any limitations pilots should be aware of there?
Not that I'm aware of offhand. You might check, and I might recommend that person asking that question or anybody interested in the limit, check the pilot's guide. That's the first place I would go. But I am not aware of a limit. If it is, it's probably quite large as far as size. I don't think there's going to be a number limit. It may, if anything, be like a megabyte limit, but I'm going to guess that it's going to be quite large, like maybe 50 to 100 megabytes. Most of what we have built into ForeFlight, at one time we did have some pretty limiting size parameters, but we've been able to overcome a lot of that with storage technological advances and things like that. So take a look. If that questioner does get concerned about the number of documents or limits, or hey, I need to put a whole bunch of these in my flight plan or this, write us and we'll work with you on trying to get you a better answer on that. But offhand, no, John, I don't know that there's a limit.
Great. Well, we're going to leave it there, and want to thank everybody for attending the webinar tonight. Great crowd, a lot of great questions, a lot of engagement. Thanks, Phil, for a wonderful presentation. Hopefully everybody, as you said, goes away with a couple of new things to check out. Reminder to check out Sporty's YouTube channel for a recording of this webinar if you missed something. That should be up in the next day or two. And visit sportys.com/webinars for more webinars coming up over the course of the next few weeks. Thanks a lot.